Are you someone who is seeking guidance and purpose and are looking and curious how intuitive medium can help bring clarity and hope for your situation? Stay tuned for this episode of SpirLift. Trece, welcome to SpirLift.
Hi, Devin. Glad to be here.
It's an honor to have you on this episode, Trece. And let me tell you, I am so excited to have this conversation with you because still, we're recording in 2021. So many people in our time right now are feeling still more lost more than ever, still unaware of how they can feel better about themselves, especially the way in which we've been experiencing this last year of 2020. And so many people have lost people because of the situation of the pandemic. So many people, unfortunately, have also lost their job. And for all those out there who are in these situations, our heart goes out to you and we truly hope the best for you. And I think this episode of SpirLift is going to be especially important for you. So please share it with anyone who you think may really want to hear this message. It is so, so important. Trece has such an excellent message to give you today to help you find peace, clarity, and focus in your life. He can help you. We're going to speak to him, and then later, as we usually do, we'll include all his information in the description and the pinned comments so you can reach out to him one-on-one if you so desire. Trece, you're an intuitive medium. And
I am.
I have, luckily had the opportunity to revise the testimonies that people who have worked with you had and all the profound things that they've come to realize about their life and their situation because of the work you do. And I think it's so important for people who are just feeling hurt or lost right now. So please, Trece, let's start off by explain to our viewers and our listeners on the podcast platform what really is an intuitive medium. Explain the work you do and how did you come to realize that you had these abilities?
Yeah, great question. So an intuitive medium, as far as I use that term, is the same thing as a psychic medium, but I choose to use the word intuitive because as much as I do like the word psychic, sometimes that makes it feel like it's a special ability or a special power or it's coming from a supernatural source versus intuitive. And most people feel or would agree that they have intuition. It's a natural thing that comes from within you, a natural way of perceiving. And so I use the phrase intuitive medium, and with my intuition, what I do is I read the patterns of your life, and I also really listen to your inner self, or what I might even call your soul, and I listen into what is coming up for you and what wants to be expressed. Sometimes what I tell people is that what I really do is I give voice to their intuition when they're having a hard time hearing it.
And when did you realize really you had the ability to do this? Like what led you to really understand that I can really help people help and find themselves? When did that all come about?
Yeah, well, the intuitive part kind of started early for me. I knew something was different because I was making predictions as a child that shouldn't have come true, and they did come true. I predicted that my baby sister would come when my parents weren't trying to have any other children. And I actually ended up on the radio for 5 years as a kid because I predicted it would snow in San Antonio on Christmas one year. And that made its way to a radio DJ, and it did. And he had me on the radio for about 5 years, predicting the weather intuitively as a kid. Now, we didn't call it intuitively or anything, but he was like, Trece, how are you doing this? These people have Doppler in science, and what are you doing? And I'm like, I look out the window and see how I feel, right? And so it was always clear to me that there was something else going on. And I was more open to the intuitive psychic part of myself than I was the medium part of myself for most of my life. Even though that showed up also at a very young age. I probably had a nightlight in my room for far too long, but it wasn't because I was afraid of the dark. I didn't have any problem with the dark, but whenever the lights would go out before bed and I'd kind of get into that sleepy state, my room would fill with the outlines of people.
Wow.
And they weren't ever doing anything scary. They were just looking at me. And as a kid, and even as an adult, that's kind of creepy, right? And so I often had a nightlight in my room, and I didn't really explore that part until really much later in my life. And I kind of feel like my own spirit and the universe put a little bit of a pause on that for me until I could really have my own experience of grief and loss as an adult, to really understand the depth of what mediumship offers to people.
Can you explain a little bit when thinking about an intuitive healer or like mediumship, like being a medium, what is kind of maybe either the differences or the similarities in both that you can explain? And does it have to do, all these abilities like have to do more in a way with certain energies, the way of is it a sensation? Is it a natural knowing? Let's if we could go into that a bit more of understanding that'd be great.
Absolutely. So it's kind of a combination of all of the things that you had already just mentioned, in the sense that our intuition is really just like our regular physical senses, except they are more fluid through time and space, right? And so you're being intuitive all the time. Intuition is an unconscious process. And then in order to access intuition skillfully, we just need to make that unconscious process conscious. So we need that information to be present to us, right? One of the things I sometimes share with my intuitive coaching clients when I help people who are wanting to wake up their intuition or having their intuition blossom already is I'll give them what I call the peanut butter analogy, which is we've all had the experience of going to the cupboard and wanting to get a jar of peanut butter for a peanut butter sandwich or whatever, and we're opening it up. We're like, where's the peanut butter? I know I bought it at the grocery store. And then it takes somebody, your partner, your kid, somebody to come up and just put it right in front of you, even though it was sitting on that shelf saying, here it is. Now, it's not that the peanut butter was invisible, and it's not that it wasn't there, and it wasn't breaking the laws of physics. But the fact of the matter is, you were not in a place where you could perceive it. And so for you, it just wasn't there. Intuition is the same way. It's happening all the time. We just haven't learned how to perceive it. It's very similar to emotional intelligence, right? We all have emotions, but in order to develop emotional intelligence, we have to really allow our emotions to become more expressive and more textured within us so we can describe them more efficiently and more effectively. It's the same with intuition. And intuition, the most important thing to know about that is that it always answers questions, okay? So even if you're not aware of your questions, your intuition is seeking to answer the questions that you hold in your life all the time.
I think that's a great point, because I've never heard it like that actually before. It's answering a question, right? And so do you think, I don't know, do you think if we are not, if many people in the world are either fighting against their intuition in a certain way or just not aware of it, their life naturally is more difficult because they're not tapping into their intuition? Or is it almost the inverse of that, where it might be part of their life's plan to face a lot of these difficulties and they just have to figure out how to work through them? How do you see that?
Well, I would say that I don't know if I think it's part of their life plan necessarily to have the challenge of resisting their intuition necessarily, as much as, but I would say that life is harder when you do resist your intuition, because it is answering questions, and it's also gathering the information that you need to make really powerful and authentic decisions, right? And so sometimes our intuition isn't always, we can use our own intuition against us, is also the other thing, right? Is that we can use intuition to keep us focused on what other people want us to do. Like we can use our intuition to telepathically listen to all of our critics versus all of our supporters. We can use our intuition because a lot of times what we think is just happening in our head is actually happening in a psychic relationship with the world around us. Okay? And so we can use our intuition to make our lives harder, but its function is to make our lives more effective and more authentic.
No, that's excellent insight. And I I'm curious to ask you what you do. All right. So
Sure.
part of what I, getting ready for this episode, I saw that you help people understand what spirited living is. Can you go into detail about that aspect of your work and what that encompasses, please?
Yeah, I call a lot of my coaching programs spirited living, and I use that term for two reasons. It kind of has two different meanings. Spirited is generally means somebody who is full of life, right? Somebody who is full of passion and energy. And so the coaching programs are meant to do that as well, to help you feel more fully alive, more full of yourself, more full of energy, but also spirited in this sense that it opens up your awareness to your own spiritual guidance team. We all have guides. We all have well-wise, loving ancestors that are here to help lend their strength and their blessing to our purpose. We all have connections in spirit that are with us all the time, and they're always trying to help us out. And if we can get into alignment with that and conscious with that and intentional with that, it becomes truly magical.
In which way have you come to understand that there are these spirits that help guide us? Like what kind of, for yourself personally, come to understand and know that, and also working with other people, how have you come to understand that you know that to be true?
Well, let me first say that even when I get a new client and I'm telling them that I'm going to tune into their guides, I say, you do not need to believe in spirit guides whatsoever. You can consider it just this weird thing that I say. And so I'm not really dedicated to people believing or not believing in spirit guides in terms of literal spirits that are out there, even though I might experience it that way, and more as sources of support that are coming from outside of our self-concept, if that makes sense, right? And the way I came to know that is that when I started doing readings for people, and even before I was doing readings, I would get a sense, I guess I should talk about it a little bit more in present time. When I'm doing a reading now for somebody, and this is sort of how I figured it out, is that if it's my own intuition, it's kind of coming from, it feels like it's coming through me, right? It's like my own senses. It's what I'm seeing. It's what I'm feeling. It's what I'm perceiving. And then I noticed that when I would get a message from a guide, it would come from the side, almost like it was like somebody whispering in my ear, but it was a whole thought, right? And it would just sort of like land. An impression would almost, they feel like they come from the side. And so they feel like they come from more outside of me. And they also come with personality sometimes, right? And so like I will start to feel my own energy change as those messages come in. And I can tell that it's coming from another source. And for me as well, I mean, I was in contact with what I would now call my guides from the time I was a little kid, right? I just remember having these friends when I was a child that were adults when I was a child that weren't there to anybody else. They were my spirit friends pretty much. And I still connect with them to this day. They take on a very different tone now than when I was a child, but I'm also not a child anymore. And so that's how I came to really know spirit guides. And then it doesn't take long before, again, like I was sharing with you before the show, that you really discover that spirit guides, animal guides, ancestors, all of these things are super common across the world in various cultures. These aren't new concepts. And so once I really discovered that, because I got really into mythology and I got really into, you could say, ancient religions, even when I was pretty young. Thank you, Dollaray's Book of Greek Myths, which most of us got into Greek myths with that. And you just learn that it's actually normal for people to perceive their life as spirited versus as alone and isolated and exiled.
So interesting and insightful, Trece. And I'm wondering, just to stay on that theme a little bit, I think any person, if they're really willing to and wanting to and able to, they can tap in to this intuition, right? Like no single person is denied this ability from your point of view, right?
That's correct. No, nobody is. And like I had shared before, I do believe, and I have in my own experience, I know this to be true, that some people are just more tuned into it. Right. And what that also just really means is that they're just more sensitive, right? Like we've become so much more aware in recent years of the phenomena of the highly sensitive person. and that there's a certain percentage of the population that's a highly sensitive person. And what that means is that you just simply take in and notice more stimuli from the environment, whether local or non-local, than an average person. And all intuition is, and especially people who are intuitively talented, is that they're just extra highly sensitive and they pick up on even more subtle like forms of information. But in my experience, intuition is also a survival tool. So if you're alive right now, you have your intuition to thank. It stopped you from stepping off that curb just before the truck came. Yeah. It had you turn left instead of right when the building fell. Right? It said, stop longer at this stoplight. Don't go when it's green.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So those are the kind of signals and indicators that there's that there to keep us out of harm's way, even, when bad things may come about, right? So
and life's not perfect, right? It doesn't keep you from every challenge. It doesn't keep necessarily every quote unquote bad thing from happening. But it allows, especially when you are conscious of it, it allows you to navigate your life with a clear sense of direction that is meant to keep you healthy, whole, and integrated.
Absolutely. And going back to our spirit guides, because I'm curious as well. And like we said at the beginning, a lot of people, we're filming this in 2021. Unfortunately, a lot of people over the course of last year have lost someone close to them for many different reasons, apart from COVID being one of them, of course. But this is such a new phenomenon that we're, for lack of a better expression, that we're living through, that have taken a lot of people's lives, unfortunately. So I'm curious, Trece, like you said that there are these spirit guides that do help us and are with us at all times. And however, also, especially loved ones that we were really close to and growing up with, because the way I've heard or understood it in other ways is that if we had a close one who lost their life and have moved on, there seems, from what I've heard it explained a different way before, is that they're close with us within a certain amount of days, maybe a couple weeks or so, then they're gone. And then it may or may not be easy to have any sort of contact or interaction with them in any way if we're able to, right? Like they're just their spirit or whatever you want to call it has moved on somewhere else. Do you see it that way? Like, for example, if I've lost someone and it's been a year or 2 or 5 or whatever, are they gone forever, so to speak? Or are they still a part of us? Or are they still around us? And if so, how have you been able to help people bring that sort of communication back to form?
Absolutely. So afterlife mediumship is what I would call that, right? Even as opposed to speaking with spirit guides, which is a form of mediumship. But afterlife mediumship, specifically speaking to loved ones in spirit, has completely radically changed my view of life and what happens after life. Okay, because I had my own beliefs about it. I had some, spirit guide visions about that. But when I really started consciously doing mediumship for people, I was astonished at the level of eternal connection between all of us. Because they would come through and they'd bring through other people who had passed that they had maybe had really big problems with in life. And so like I'd be reading for somebody and they'd be like, why would they come together? Like they never liked each other. And it's like, and from their perspective, they're already always connected. We're always connected now. That's how intuition works. We're just so much more aware of it once we pass. It becomes so much more clear, right? It's almost like the aperture opens a little bit. And so we are always connected. Yes, you are connected to your loved ones that you may have lost when you were a child. You're connected to your loved ones that passed maybe even just last week or last month or during this whole pandemic. They are absolutely still with us. And now there's greater and lesser levels of attention, right? So sometimes they might actually have a lot of attention on you and you can really sense them around you. And other times it's really either they don't or your attention is not. So I'd like to speak a little bit about what you were asking about, how people sometimes feel that their loved ones are around them within weeks of their passing and then they seem to move on. What I think is happening there is that when we lose somebody really close to us, we tend to get blown open in grief. And we're not in our normal state of mind. We're not in our normal state of being, and we're not in our normal lives. And that opens our awareness outside of our habitual patterns to notice things we might not have noticed before. And of course, our loved ones want to come and let us know that they're okay. Mm-hmm. And so we're more likely to perceive it then. But the reason that seems to go away is for a number of things. One, we need to move on, right? And it's more that we need to move on, more so than even the spirit needs to move on. Like, they've moved, they're gone. They're not in this lifetime anymore, right? We're the ones that need to move on. And it's healthy for us to move on. And then we can create a new relationship with them in spirit that doesn't always activate that sense of loss anymore. Because even as a medium, I can tell you right now, I have grieved the loss of people that I loved, even fully well knowing that they're alive in spirit. Because it's just not the same. It's just not, right? And yet, when we connect through mediumship to our loved ones on the other side, the knowing and the level of information that comes through and that feeling of their presence being there really reminds us, and this is what I like to say about it, is that love never dies.
Mm-hmm. That's a really profound
That
statement.
love never dies.
Yeah,
and that's what they come to remind us in mediumship.
No, that is really profound, actually, because I think we sometimes forget that there are the most powerful forces really when we do even experience them in our day-to-day in our human life as love, right? And I think a lot of the way I see it and speaking to other people, on SpirLift, that I've come to understand from my own way of seeing things is that in the end of the day, two main things fall under two main categories. And not to be too simplistic with this, but I see it as kind of certain things always falling under a love energy, and then everything else under a fear energy. Love and fear. I think there's so many things that encompass the umbrella of those two things that can help us explain our day-to-day. And if we embrace one or the other, our life will be totally different. I don't know, that's just the way I kind of have come to understand it from my own. But also, Trece, I want to understand, just speaking to this related to grief. So let's go into deeper detail in sort of your way of helping people come to, let's do this in two ways of understanding your work. Okay. Number one, you help people very specifically in the way in which you help them with the grief. And two, if people really feel lost out there, like just with, I don't know where my life is going, life sucks and everything's falling apart, how do you help them come back to a center to understand their purpose? So let's go into both those details, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's kind of interesting because I always open up a session. I ask people, I'm like, where would you like to focus today? Do you want to focus more on life guidance or mediumship or some sort of combo, right? And so you're kind of asking about those two different categories alone. And so intuitive life guidance, the way I help people with that is that I do connect in with guides for intuitive life guidance, but then I also tune into their energy, and I specifically do it from my heart. So I just imagine that I reach out to them from my heart, and then I start talking with the intention of bringing through clear, concise, and accurate information that is healing and purposeful for them, so that way my intuition through my heart connects in with those places that need to be come up, that need to be brought into light, that need to be spoken to, that need to be evaluated a little bit more in order for that person to get that clear sense again of who they are and what their real intentions are. And so intuitive reading can also be very healing, and because information is healing, and information, if we want to kind of go meta with it, is energy, right? And we know that more now than ever in our technological world, is that energy and information are almost the same thing, right? And so if I can intuitively access information for you that is healing, it actually energetically also heals at the same time and gives you a little bit more of an embodied experiential perspective of that intuitive guidance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. For all the SpirLifters, everyone listening out there, more on the YouTube channel rather than the podcast, let us know below in the comments. Does this make sense to you? Is this something that you understand, that you're seeking out, that is of importance to you? Please comment below, and it would be great to know. Carrie, please continue, Trece. Thank you.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I love about both of them, but I'll still speak about intuitive life guidance a little bit more, is that what it does is it also allows somebody, without you telling me anything about your life, you will know that I'm in an intimate understanding of you and your life. And it starts to dissolve that illusion of separation and disconnection, to know that somebody you've never spoken to can have an intimate understanding of you and your life.
And how are you able to bring that about? How are you able to really connect with that and do that? How do you go about that?
Well, I like to say that I work in, I'm an evidential medium, and I do evidence-based intuition. And what that means is that I will talk about specific things in your life that you will be able to identify. Some of it is going to be emotional states and psychological states and spiritual experiences, but it's really important to me to ground it in real life things that you can connect with and say, yes, that happened to me. Yes, that's happening in my life. Yes, that person is in my life, and this is our relationship dynamic, right? Does that make sense? Yes, this is what is happening at my work, even though I never even said I wanted to talk about work.
Sure. And that's how you're able to pick that up. And then also, I'm curious then, Trece, going on the purpose line of it, how are you able to bring people to this understanding of their direction in life? If they're just totally lost, they've gone through too much, they don't really want to pick up the pieces anymore, how do you kind of bring them back into the understanding that there is a purpose, that there is a sort of, guided way in which they can really approach their life with more enthusiasm and motivation? How do you guide them in that way?
That's a great question. Purpose is a huge part of what I do, because I feel like that people are missing out on that more than anything these days, right? And the way I do that, I just recently posted a great quote from Pablo Picasso on my Instagram, which says, the meaning of life is to discover your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away. Okay. And so what I do with people is that I intuitively seek out their gifts, and I remind them of their gifts that connect in with their real feeling of who they are. Because once they know their gifts, all they want to do is give it away. And that's our purpose.
Right. That's really insightful. And that's a great way to look at it. It's like, I think more people feel this, again, intuitive sense of satisfaction by giving, by sharing, by connecting. It's always about the expression, this outwardly expression of, again, under the umbrella of love, of expansion, of reaching out, right? I think that gives us the most generally fulfillment in life by doing that, no? Because everything else seems to go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, in many of our gifts, I was recently working with an intuitive coaching client of mine, and we were talking about gifts in this way. And I kind of pointed out one of his gifts that he had mentioned, and he kind of brushed over. It was sort of like, oh, that thing that I do. Oh, yeah, that thing. No big deal, right? Many of our gifts are so natural to us, we don't actually see them as gifts. But that's what makes them gifts, is it's so easy for us to give them to people, and it changes their lives for the better. It's not a gift to make us special. It's a gift because we can help and heal people by being who we really are.
Which is, the greatest gift that we can come to realize for ourselves and for humanity, is just our natural, authentic form of expression that, has been, in a sense, quote unquote, endowed to us to be able to live this life, right? And that's really fascinating. Yeah. And we only have a few minutes, unfortunately, on this episode of SpirLift. And comment below, SpirLifters, is this a really interesting topic? Is this a really useful topic for your own understanding in this journey of life? Is this something that you've been seeking out? Please comment below and let us know what you think about everything Trece is speaking of right now. And Trece, as we are concluding this episode of SpirLift, let's go into this next part about your understanding of our human experience on this planet. Like, from everything that you've come to understand about our human life at your young age of 25, 30, I imagine, right?
38, thank you.
All right, there you go. Okay. Feels,
intuitive healing works, folks. It's got more benefits than you might think.
There you go. You heard from Trece himself.
Yeah.
From everything that you've come to learn for yourself, from working with so many people around this topic, just firstly, to start this, what have you come to understand our human experience to be on this earth? What is our sort of reason of having, let's say, a finite mortality, as you, Trece, me, Devin, you, whoever out there watching this or listening to this? What is, this 80, 90, 100 years, maybe more for the next generations? What is this whole way of living, supposed to be about, in your opinion?
In my opinion, from what I have experienced and what I've learned from Spirit, is our purpose here is to have a unique perspective and to bring that unique perspective into full expression into the world. Our purpose here is to be like artists. It's to be creators. Because we are so many things. We are all of our ancestors. We are our environments, our ecosystems. We are our communities. We are our social systems. We are the Milky Way galaxy, right? Like, we are all of these things, plus your uniqueness. And so it kind of gives the universe's worth of creative tools to say, and how will you create with these?
What you're saying is so important, because speaking with many other people of understanding life in general, and what our purpose here is in this human experience, that word that you use, being creators, is really the most fundamental important aspect. And it's interesting because a lot of people don't think like that. They just think, oh, you're a tool, or you're this, or you're that. But we are creators, right? What Trece's talking about as far as our intuition and how we can lean into that if we so desire to understand many things. As we said in other episodes, how we can manifest certain things if we really tap into that as well. We are creating our reality and understanding its way of unfolding in front of us if we so desire. And people really miss that, I think. And I think it's really important you brought that up.
Yeah, and and it's so important for me too to also speak to, because I'm all about co-creating your reality, but that co is so important to me, because it's not just between you and source or some disembodied universe. That co means you in community, in relationship. Right? And so that's the only way we can even have an experience of our uniqueness, is to be in relationship with the world. Because how would we know we were unique unless we had those relationships?
That's a very important point, because as you and I spoke about off air for this episode, about the interconnectedness, the tapestry of each of our individual states of being with each other, and how that way of cooperating with each other and engaging with each other really is the existence of everything, which is phenomenal. And just one last thing, Trece, and this has just been absolutely insightful and I think very important conversation on SpirLift, and I think our viewers and listeners, will absolutely agree that this has just been terrific with you. And I just want to finish by saying, for those out there, who, again, have lost someone, who are grieving, who are going through a difficult time of loss, just in general, whether it's a person or even a pet. I mean, sometimes we love our pets so dearly, we never want to think about them leaving us. Is there, in your, again, way of how you've come to understand so many things with your capabilities and abilities and everything else. Would you say there is a notion or an understanding that whoever's been part of our human experiences, like that when we pass, that we will be re-engaged with them in some capacity post our own individual human life?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that I've learned from Afterlife mediumship is how we cannot not be connected to each other, and that everyone, especially in spirit, and even now we just have a hard time because it's slowed down a little bit in this human experience, but even now that connection is just a thought away. It's just an attention away. It's just a shift of attention, and then there's that living connection all over again, right? And I like to tell people I don't have all the answers to the universe or how all this happens. I'm constantly learning and exploring, and I love the science that is happening around it at the same time. But if there's one thing that is maybe general, but that I think really explains all of it, it's just a few simple things. One is that everything is one, there is no time, and we're all connected.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible. And I think, I've personally been able to have that type of insight and realization, especially through meditation. When you really go deep and really dedicate yourself intentionally, I like to use the word intentionally into meditation, because you just can't just close your eyes and imagine your thoughts going away. I don't think it's like that. I've come to understand it is really an actual discipline and practice to meditate. When you
Absolutely.
are attaching, when you really come to understand it and experience it profoundly, it's really an attachment to nothing. And what you just said, those 3 points, is that, for me personally, I came to understand that, time is really a construct, and that's a very, I can't just say that and you'll understand that. It's not an analytical thing. You have to really come to know that. And when I say come to know that, I'm not saying with your brain. I'm saying the only way you can explain it is by experience, for lack of a better way of explaining that. But I think you understand what I'm saying by that, Trece. And I
do.
Please comment below, SpirLifters. Have you come to experience what Trece is speaking about with that, and also through meditation of understanding those points, what he's saying? Please comment below and let us know your thoughts and give us your feedback. And Trece, I just want to thank you so much for being on this episode of SpirLift. The work you do, and I encourage all of our listeners, viewers, we're going to include all of Trece's information in the description below, in the pinned comments, everywhere where you usually find it. So then you can check out in more detail his work, what he does, and connect with Trece. Connect with Trece if you're just feeling lost, your purpose in life, clarity, anything. Just if you want to get on the right track, reach out to him. And if you're also grieving, and if you're going through a really difficult time, also reach out to Trece. He can really, really help you. So just for our viewers and listeners, Trece, just to kind of say it out loud as well, where can they connect with you? What are the best places they can connect with you?
Well, the first and best place to connect with me is through my website, which is my name, TreceSpalten.com. And from there, you can sign up with my newsletter, and that'll keep you in touch with everything that I'm doing. You'll get a free guide to instant intuition. And it'll also, from my website, you can also connect with me on my Instagram and my Facebook pages.
Perfect. And I have all that information, SpirLift, so you will have it as well below. Connect with Trece. And Trece, any final words to our viewers and listeners?
For the viewers and listeners, I just want you to know that the experience of who you really are and your authentic self is not elusive, and that you can find it. And it's a state that you can really experience all the time. And know that you are also never alone, and that we are designed to be supported by life and by the universe, and to live our lives authentically and spirited.
That is excellent. What a great statements to close with. And we just wish you all out there listening and viewing this episode, really just change your life around today in any way that you really desire and really want to connect with Trece. And it was an absolute pleasure having you on this episode, Trece. and
Oh,
being
thank
your
you so
guest.
much, Devin. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it so much.
Thank you so much, Trece. And we will see you all on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.